Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. You and I have undoubtedly seen adults behaving badly, and we sometimes wonder if they were ever disciplined as children. It's become a bit of a trope, and yet it's very true because childhood discipline has lifelong effects, not just in how we behave, it also predicts the way we resolve conflicts as adults. We discuss discipleship discipline with Dr. Greg Popcak, who joins us every week, founder and director of CatholicCounselors.com with his bride Lisa Popcak, and he and his bride Lisa are the hosts of More to Life, a call-in advice program that's produced by Ave Maria Radio and EWTN, and they're also the developers and producers of the CatholicHOM app, the CatholicHOM app, a resource helping Catholic families thrive. Greg, thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
I'm very well, Marcus. Thanks for having me.
Well, always a joy to speak with you. And this is a topic that you and I have anywhere from spoken about to joked about in the past. But sometimes you do look at adults wondering, gosh, did anyone say no to you as a child ever?
That's true. But, you know, the one of the things that people don't often understand is the way we're disciplined tends to become the way we resolve conflicts in marriage as adults. You know, because the way we're disciplined teaches conflict management, or sometimes it doesn't teach conflict management. And so one of the points that we make, you know, we adhere to this approach in CatholicHOM called Discipleship Discipline, which is rooted in the philosophies of St. John Bosco, his child-rearing approach, which he called the preventive system. But his approach really rejected heavy-handed punishments.
Right.
In favor of kind of building virtue, mentoring, practicing good behavior, and those kinds of things. And so we've observed that the 5 steps that are key, or at the heart of what we call discipleship discipline, in adulthood, say in married relationships especially, become the foundation for what we call compassionate problem resolution, or CPR. That the same 5 steps that we encourage parents to use in disciplining their kids through discipleship discipline are also a great 5-step plan for handling marital conflicts more effectively.
And it really is a kind of CPR to the way the conflict. I'm sorry, I laughed at that. If the pun wasn't intended, it's still.
Oh no,
apropos.
it definitely is. No, it definitely is. Didn't mean to step on the laugh, but no, it's intentionally funny because I think that we need to sometimes jumpstart to the heart of the relationship by approaching conflict in a more compassionate way.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And like I've told you, I've adopted a lot of the wisdom I've gained from you and Lisa in my own parenting. And I've seen the results because there really is a component here where when we're trying to discipline by way of discipleship and modeling virtue, the emulation of that virtue becomes initially difficult, but eventually it becomes habit. So on the part of the person modeling as well as the person receiving the modeling.
That's absolutely right. And so let me walk through and just kind of give some examples of how this works both in parenting and in adulthood. So the steps of discipleship discipline in parenthood and then what we call compassionate problem resolution, or CPR, in marriage are as follows. Number 1, you want to identify the problem as opposed to attacking the person. So let's say your kid is speaking disrespectfully. I mean, it's easy to kind of get your back up about that. And of course, it needs to be handled. But instead of pouring gas on the fire by coming at the child in sort of a heavy-handed way, you can say, look, I understand that you're upset. How can you say that more respectfully? Let's talk about that, right? So you're identifying the problem, not attacking the person. Same thing with your spouse. Your spouse does something that hurts you. And instead of lashing out at them, because you're such a jerk for acting that way. Why are you so mean? Being able to say, well, what's going on right now? What's that about, right? So you're trying to approach it in a helpful way, identifying the problem as opposed to attacking the person, whether that's the child or your spouse. Second step is identifying the intention behind the behavior, right? So the child didn't do this just to make my life more complicated or more difficult. They feel that way, but they're trying to do something, whether that's express a feeling or express a need or solve a problem. They're just doing it in a ham-fisted way. Right. So if I can help them identify the intention, then I can know what they're trying to do. Same thing with my spouse, right? Instead of taking offense, hey, what were you trying to do when you said that or did that thing? It was kind of hurtful, but what did you mean by it? And they can tell me, and now we can start to go to the third step, which is identify more virtuous alternatives. Let's brainstorm different ways to handle this problem the next time it comes up. And we can do that both with the kid and with the adult, right? Then there's step 4 will be relationship repair. Sometimes the things we do hurt the relationship. And so walking the child through what are some things that you could do to kind of make this better, to either clean up the mess that you made literally or figuratively so that we can feel better about each other. Same thing's true in grown-up relationships. Okay, we figured out what we could do the next time this problem comes up. Is there anything that we need to do to reassure each other that we're in a good place and that we're taking care of each other? And then the last step is kind of plan for future success. Don't just assume that because we talked about it once, it's now resolved forever. Within childhood or in parenting, what kind of situations can I set up to either practice or role play this new behavior to make sure that as a parent I'm staying on top of this and giving the kid opportunities to rehearse this new behavior or remind them, say, when we wake up in the morning, hey, remember, we talked about when this problem comes up, this is how we're going to handle it instead of this way, right? And so we build in these little structures that help the kid remember. Same thing in marriage. Okay, we've resolved the problem. Now, how are we going to make sure that we remember to do this new thing the next time the problem comes up? And so these 5 steps, work for parenting and work for adult relationships, because that's really what parenting is supposed to be about, teaching our kids how to have healthy, holy, and effective grown-up relationships.
And really, if we adopt all of this, I recall, even as you're talking, I'm having flashbacks to some of the students I taught all the way up till the high school level, age 18, and you realize that not mastering these steps manifest themselves in the way they conduct themselves in conflict resolution, even up to the point of graduation and after.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, again, people tend to think that parenting is just about stopping bad behavior,
right?
And if that's our expectation, then then we can use a whole bunch of tools that are just focused to that purpose. But really, parenting is not just about stopping bad behavior. It's about helping this child learn how to have relationship and have healthy relationship skills. And so a lot of parenting involves teaching kids how to manage conflict and solve problems. Yep. And those lessons are going to follow them for the rest of their lives. We can either teach them healthy ways to solve conflict and manage problems and resolve issues, or we can just teach them unhealthy things by just focusing on stopping the behavior. And so often in marriage counseling, I talk to lots of couples who are just focused on stopping the behavior. My spouse upset me, so now we stop that. As if change could be that easy, right? But walking through these steps, whether it's in parenting or in my adult relationships, kind of conveys that coherent message about what it takes to solve problems, resolve conflict, and negotiate differences.
And I'm glad that you already brought up the marriage component, because the way we're disciplined as children eventually translates into the way we conduct ourselves as adults. So in our college career, our eventual work career, but also in our marital relationships, if we don't unlearn bad habits to relearn new habits, we carry them forward because they've become a part of how we resolve conflict.
Well, that's exactly right. And so what happens there is that we unconsciously rely on those scripts that we learned, from childhood about how to manage a problem. So my spouse does something that offends me, and in my right brain, right, it goes. Well, let me just step back for a second. So when we're in a high pressure situation like conflict, for example, our right brain's job is to go back through our catalog of experiences and say, in a millisecond, and say, well, you know what, this is sort of like that. Go with it. Right, so if my spouse does something that reminds me of a situation that happened in childhood, my right brain is going to say that those things are equivalent, even though they're not, right? And because that's how I make snap decisions in the moment. So the ways I was parented and taught how to resolve conflicts become my go-to script for handling adult conflict, even if it doesn't apply anymore. And so, the more I'm able to use a similar approach with my children that I'm going to want them to use in adulthood to solve conflicts, the more I'm training their right brain to go back to experiences that actually would apply. Right. So instead of shaming my spouse for getting it wrong, or trying to punish them for doing something wrong, or just freezing them out, or whatever that we learned from bad parenting interactions, we're able to have healthier, more proactive approaches.
Greg, thank you so very much for having this conversation with us.
Always a pleasure, Marcus. Thank you.
Greg and Lisa are hosting a conference, an online conference about this very topic. And so we're going to have the link in the description of this program in our archives on AveMariaRadio.net. I was talking to Dr. Greg Popcak of CatholicHOM. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.